Hello to everyone. Welcome to History Matters, and so does the world's biggest mug of coffee. Oh, and there's another mug of coffee.
Yep.
It is episode 265, right? I believe
265, yes.
265. Okay, because I forget. In a nanosecond, I forget. But it is episode 265. 265 episodes. But before we begin today's topic, which is going to be basically anything goes, I turn to my wonderful partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History, and we gather here every Friday morning. We have a very robust chat that's always going on well before we zoom in with you all. And the idea behind this is Joanne talks about today's topic for usually it's about 30 minutes, but today, if we're doing anything goes, might be a little less. And when she's done with that, I will check for your questions down in the Q&A. Since it's anything goes, today's questions are pretty much anything goes. So I will see you in a few minutes.
And I will acknowledge that anything goes is a little daunting because anything goes. If there is anyone who is here for the first time, please say so in chat. Because you'll get a robust welcome from the Wonderful History Matters community, which, after 264 previous episodes, is really a community at this point. So you will get welcomed. Okay, so anything goes. I thought, so my last day of teaching was this past Wednesday. And initially I thought, actually my students and my colleagues sort of taught me a few things or made me think about a few things over the course of the last year, which I thought I would sort of toss in. But I didn't want to dedicate the whole episode to that, although since I know there are many folks in our community, definitely not all, but there are many teachers in this community, given that it's the National Council for History Education sponsoring us. Feel free if you want to throw that into the anything goes bucket. But I really did. It's been a while since we've had an anything goes conversation, and there's so much we could talk about that I figured I would open it up. But let me just offer you, as we begin, just a handful of the things that actually just thinking back in the last few days over this last academic year, um, things that who was it? Was it Arsenio Hall who used to say things that make you go, hmm? And now I've proven myself to be 892 years old yet again. But I believe that that was a thing he did. And I know somewhere in chat people will be saying yes or no, or yes, you're 892 years old. But regardless, a few things that came to mind thinking about this past school year. The first thing, and I mentioned it in a different context earlier, and that was around election time, uh, because of the vibe I was getting from particularly my undergrads in my seminar. It was the vibe, the mood in the classroom was strange. And when I began talking to the students, it, of course, is obvious, but I hadn't thought of it before. Um, they don't know. This was their first election. They don't know what a normal election is like. They don't know what a normal election cycle is like. They don't know a lot of things that if you're older, you have a sense of what normal is, and you have a sense of how many ways right now, the many ways in which things are not normal. Hadn't thought of that before. The degree to which, again, these are younger people, so they don't necessarily know normal because they haven't been around long enough to experience it. But it made me think about the fact that those of us who know from normal, those of us who know what normal political times are like, normal just times in the United States are like, it's important for us to remember that and to remind people of that. I know we hear people say over and over and over and over again, don't normalize this. This is being normalized. And that's correct, right? We constantly have to say this isn't normal. This isn't normal. But in an even broader way, I think it's important to really own the degree to which what we're experiencing now really isn't the normal way in which things proceed. That's particularly important, and you can comment on this if you want when I stop talking and we sort of open things up. But the degree to which this is, daunting, scary, whatever else for us, it's more so if you can feel, like the students can, that people don't understand what's happening, but they really don't have a solid ground to stand on because they don't even know what it's supposed to be like. They just know that somehow or other people are saying this isn't it. So us generally remembering what is normal, reminding ourselves what is normal, and reminding others, like normal versus not, I think is really important. And my students taught me that this last year. The other thing, or another thing, I think there's two or three things I want to mention here. Another thing that just recently happened, and it surprised me. That we had a faculty meeting. We were talking about a variety of things to do or think about in the current moment that we're living in, politically and otherwise. And one of my colleagues said to me quietly, "This is scary. I'm scared." And I don't know if the logic of this will make sense, um, but I found that a relief. I found it because we were talking about things in this meeting that I found unsettling. Not bad things, but just like I think in that moment I was like, wow, like we're here we are in this weird moment. And I was looking around the room at my colleagues, and they all were sort of sitting there and having a normal meeting. And in my mind, I was like, this gets back to my former point. Doesn't really feel totally normal, some of this. And when one of my colleagues said, "This is scary, I'm actually scared," uh, it was a relief to me to know that others were alarmed, scared, disconcerted, pick your word, but that I wasn't alone, sort of feeling like, wow, I don't really know what's going on, and it's kind of scary. Um, I think in one way or another, probably a lot of us at one moment or another, or many moments, are feeling nervous, scared, alarmed. Again, you fill in the word. I don't think, not only do I not think it's a bad thing to admit that you're feeling scared or nervous, I think it's kind of a good thing, depending on how you do it, because that creates a real bond between all of us, right? We're not, the fact that we feel alarmed by what's going on around us and that it feels scary, that's not necessarily acknowledging weakness. That's acknowledging that we together, we, again, know that this isn't normal, it doesn't feel right. And because of that, it's alarming. It can be scary. I think that very human admission, first of all, I think that's probably healthy for us to acknowledge, but I think that's important because I think that's a unifier and not necessarily a sign of weakness. So I was surprised when this person said that to me, and my immediate response without thinking was, "Oh, that feels good to hear someone say that." And then I thought, wait, what? But I think that's why, right? Because otherwise we sort of sit in our own little isolated bubble of various sorts, just feeling nervous or scared or whatever. And the idea that there are many people thinking this too, which also you're not alone, you're not isolated, and also it's normal to feel kind of alarmed right now, right? So on many levels, it surprised me how positive that admission felt, hearing that come out of somebody else's mouth. I see lots of thumbs up coming up. So anyway, that was more important to me than I thought it would be in the last week or two. Um, Sort of along the same lines, but this was really more related to my students, and I might have mentioned this before too. I thought a lot this last year about how our responses to things matter to others. And of course, that's very true if you're a teacher and you're talking about your students, which is the context in which this came up to me in the actually this last semester. But it's not just teachers and it's not just students, that the way we are processing this and thinking about it and responding to it and talking about it really matters. And it's important, we, of course, are all bound up in our own feelings about what's going on. But we're not alone. And what we do does affect others in a positive way, not just like, oh no, I'm going to make other people be scared, but in a positive way. If you're acknowledging where you are in this moment, you will free up others to do the same. And then you can actually have a conversation, have a discussion, come together to act. I mentioned this moment, but again, not in this context. A couple of weeks ago, whenever it became public that a few of my colleagues at Yale were leaving next semester to go to Canada. And um, the students in my undergraduates, someone mentioned that before we officially began class, and then I could see um, the students' faces kind of just go blank, right? I felt the response, and they all looked to me. And I don't know if they were looking to me to be comforting. I don't know if they were looking to me because they wondered if I was going to go away. I don't know what it was, but they froze and then they looked at me. And it, again, made me think about the ways in which what we think and how we're processing this and what it means to us. Again, very obviously in a teacher-student context, but not only in that context, really matters. Now, I didn't have magical words to tell my students. I could just say, well, I heard that too. And I don't even remember now. I must have said something about, well, these are times that, we actually can't predict what's going to happen. And I don't even remember what I said. I tried to say something comforting, but not fake. And it must have worked in some way because we then went on and had class. Um, but again, I suppose one of the things my students taught me this last year, but particularly this last semester, is the ways in which we all matter to each other. And again, I know it's hyper magnified when you're talking about teachers and students, but we all matter to each other. I mean, that's part of why our community here at History Matters, 265 episodes, see, it's still in my head, that it's part of why we're here and we're a community and why we keep coming back again and again and again, week after week after week, because how we matter to each other, our responses matter to each other. This is a place where we can actually acknowledge those responses, hash them out between us. I think that matters so profoundly. And I know it's tiresome at this point for me to say anyone could do this. We can all do this. You can all go and do this with other people. Like we could all have communities in person or through Zoom in which we just get together like once a week, once every 2 weeks, something, once a month, to just hash things through and talk and engage as a community of people. I think that really, really matters. I think feeling that there's a community of people who you can talk to that way and who they can talk to you that way and who you trust in that way to engage that way, I think that really matters. And I think that particularly matters right now. And I suppose I had another point, but what I wrote, I have our responses matter. And then underneath it, I wrote, we matter. I don't know if I have to go into great detail about we matter. We do. We matter to the people who look up to us, the people that we live amongst, our family, our friends, but on a broader level, the way we're living in this moment and the way we think about it and the way we do or don't reach out to others in this moment to sort of pull ourselves together into a good frame of mind, into a positive frame of mind, a frame of mind that we can think about where we want to go as opposed to where we're being pushed. I think that's really important. So, I've been trying really hard to teach my students all semester, but I suppose this is also a way for me to thank them for continuing to teach me. I love my students. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to open chat. What a wonderful luxury. I get to actually see what
Yeah.
people are saying as you're saying it. And let's just see where our conversation goes.
Gosh, there's already 13 questions. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to start across the pond with our friend Francesca. Francesca asks, I'm totally confused about executive orders. When are they lawful and when did they start?
Well, so right, executive orders, and I think it was maybe it was Hillary Clinton who went on some social media platform this last week and said you need to actually everyone needs to remember that executive orders are not royal decrees. We don't have a king and they don't automatically go into force. And that's absolutely true. And it's hard to remember that sometimes because sometimes the press acts as though these executive orders are a done deal. And there we are, kind of thinking they're a done deal, and they're not. The complication of this moment is there are so many ways in which some aspects of government either are being disempowered and taken apart so that they can't respond properly, or are just sort of seemingly sitting back and watching. Their Congress at the moment is not exerting the power that Congress actually has to be an equal branch of government. And so an executive order doesn't instantly go into power. But this gets back to, I suppose, where I started, right? We don't actually know what happens in a moment like this where there's like a big power vacuum and there's someone sort of sucking up all the air in the room and making these pronouncements. And then there aren't people standing up and saying, yeah, no, you don't have the power to do that. I'm sorry. Like, announce it all you want, but you can't. And we're here to prevent it. It's a weird moment again because I think it's very abnormal. So little is normal about this moment. And it's not just our students. None of us precisely knows the right place to stand in this moment. And that's part of why I think some of these executive orders are being responded to in the way that they are. It would be nice if the press said, like, yeah, so there's an executive order announcing X, but actually it has no power. It's just an executive order pronouncement until X, Y, and Z happens. The press isn't, as far as I know, really doing that as assertively as they might, and that would be helpful. So I guess the overall thing that I would say would be don't assume that because something is an executive order, that it means something will automatically change. In this moment, with this kind of an executive exerting power that he doesn't have, and with people not necessarily stepping up and saying you don't actually have that power, it becomes a weird moment for those kinds of executive orders. But it's, again, important to realize executive orders are not automatically law.
Yeah. And we're also getting some love for Francesco's Horrid Henry book series over in the chat, which I think is charming.
Yay. I
Yeah,
don't know why, but I applaud them too.
it's the greatest little series. You have to check it out. Okay. Um, Troy, our good buddy, Troy says, aren't we going to have to get the courts to move faster and get U.S. Marshals involved? Authoritarians know that speed and volume steamrolls the courts.
I am going to say one thing. Biden gave out a lot of executive orders and they were not automatically obeyed. He made some kind of executive, I'm not going to actually go into detail because I'm going to get it wrong, but no, uh, executive orders are not automatically obeyed. So that's not a case. But what was the question was just about, um,
Oh, Troy asked about are we going to have to get the courts to move faster and get
oh,
U.S. Marshals involved?
well, the U.S. Marshals, I don't know. Like, I can't speak with great authority on that. I mean, it would be nice if the courts were moving more quickly. I will say the courts are moving, and I don't know if you were watching the news, but there was case after case after case after case this last week in which a judge, and some of them Trump appointed judges, stood up and said, no, you can't do that. So, it might not be seem as spicy in the news, right? It might not get as much loud play, perhaps, as other kinds of news. But the fact of the matter is, even just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot of courts stepping up and saying no. Now, as far as what that means and what happens and where we go with that, I really do think anyone at this moment who absolutely says they know what's going to happen is really not telling the truth. I don't know. But the fact that the courts are acting and that they're making decisions in this way and that we can see those decisions happening and saying, like, no, this is not lawful. I'm not going to wander off into constitutional crisis land because I really do think that that's not a very useful place to be. And I've talked about that before sometime in the semi-recent past, but please stop deciding when we cross the magical line that makes it a constitutional crisis. That means nothing. And that, yes, we are in one and fine. The fact of the matter is we have to act in this moment, period. Whether we all decide or haven't decided, it's a crisis and it has to do with the fundamentals of the Constitution. But regardless of that, I think marshals aren't on our side. I see Susan said. The fact of the matter is the courts are acting, and yes, they're not as fast as we might want them to be, but they are. And I do think that's an important point to note because I think that can be an easy one to overlook. Just go like at some point, not necessarily right now, but at some point, Google, court upholds or court overturns for the last 2 weeks. And there's going to be more than you think there are things happening out there. I've been sort of pleasantly I don't want to say surprised, but pleased, let's put it that way, in the last week or two to see the numbers of ways in which courts, and again, in some cases, Trump appointed judges are saying, no, that's not doable. That's not allowable. We're not going to let that happen. We're going to reverse. Think of all the things that are being reversed. Sorry, you have to put these people back, give them their jobs back. Sorry, and it takes a while and it takes longer than it should. But the fact that it's happening shouldn't be overlooked because that is our actual processing, right? That's what's supposed to be happening. So, that deserves to get called out as a good thing too.
Yeah. Um, it reminds me of last year when they were the strategy was to for parents trying to ban books to put thousands of books, right? To put in a request, and they were having these parties where the Moms of Liberty or whoever they are were sitting around filling out like you each have to do 100 book challenges before you get a glass of wine and that kind of nonsense, knowing that there's only one or two librarians at each school. And if there's a 30-day limit, like they have to respond within 30 days and they get 8,000 requests in one day, they're just flooding the system, knowing that no one can humanly keep up with it. So it seems like that's the strategy with the executive orders. They're just putting them out, like churning them out so fast, people don't have time to react.
It's true. I do also want to say that people aren't necessarily being mean, but when I see name calling floating
Right.
around,
I just put a reminder in the chat as well.
thank you. Yeah, and that like, after I started by praising us as such a wonderful community, um, yeah, I'm not going to tisk us, but I just a reminder
Mhm.
that where are we here? I love this we, and I know we care about each other too. So, yeah. Uh,
All right. Our good friend Daniel Abramovich asks, questions have come up about Americans getting harassed upon return from international travel. Is there anything that we should consider, especially for naturalized Americans?
right. I mean, I will say, uh, I worry about that. I worry about travel now for everyone because it's so unpredictable, right? It just is. Particularly for naturalized Americans, for people who are here on a visa, people who are here lawfully in a variety of different ways. Never mind, homegrown individuals. Yeah, I worry about that. And part of the reason any of us would worry about that is because there's a case in which potentially something happens, and after a week or 2 weeks, it gets, fixed. But meanwhile, in the week or 2 weeks, there's someone being, which is not talking about the people who are still being held for having done nothing and they're legally Americans. But I mean, just even on the basis of you come back, you're an American and you come back from somewhere, you have your happy passport, and yet somehow or other you're held back for some reason. Um, Things are getting righted, but if any of us were, held back and put in some kind of, restraint, held, I don't know, not necessarily jail, but basically held back, kept away from leaving the airport and going back to our lives for some reason that seemingly isn't very valid. Yeah, I worry about that all the time. I don't have a big solution for that. I do feel that I think, how do I put this? I think when people travel, when we travel, we should take like extra benefit care. And by that I mean, be sure you have the names of people you might want to call if you had to call somebody, and then phone numbers and have them written down and not necessarily on your phone. I don't know about you, but I never remember phone numbers now,
Oh, neither.
right? None. So, I think just generally speaking, I can't remember what I read recently, but I was thinking like, wow, if I didn't have my phone, I don't think I could call anybody really, because I don't even my own number sometimes I kind of get on the
I
edge
don't
of
know
death.
my siblings' numbers. I don't know my best
No,
friend's
nothing.
number. I don't
Well,
know your
you
number. I
know,
don't know.
that's a goofy thing, and that's not meant to be an alarmist thing, but it's a thing that I thought about recently that just seemed like it would be a smart thing, would be to just have some things with me written down so that if I have to remember them, they're written on paper and they're not, So that's all I can say. I can't say anything other than where I started, which is again, remember what is or isn't normal. Remember your rights, right? I mean, you do have a right to speak up and say, well, but may or may not have an impact, but you do have that right. And little things that you can do that, even if nothing else, they make you feel a little bit calmer in the moment. Like, okay, I got phone numbers in my wallet written down. I feel better. Do it. Why not? It's not going
I
to
do
hurt
that
anyone.
tonight when I get home.
I mean,
Yeah, it's weird. I can remember the landline that I grew up with and my grandparents next door. Those are the only two phone numbers, and they don't even work anymore. Like we don't even know who lives there anymore.
I really don't know any phone numbers and sometimes forget my own. So, yeah. And so people are saying, various things that people tell you to do. And again, I can't vouch for these or pronounce these as things to do. Yeah, Freeman's brain numbers, dates, phone numbers. Yeah. But at any rate, there are all kinds of things people out there in the world say to do, don't have facial recognition turned on your phone so that, they can't. I don't know. I have no great pronouncements about this. All I can say is if there are little things that you can do that make you feel better and make you feel more secure and it doesn't hurt anything, do them, really. But I don't have great advice to say about what to do now, other than to point out the fact that anyone who is legally here, the fact that whether they were born here or not, the fact that anyone who is legally here is worried now about leaving or coming back into this country, that is beyond abnormal, right? That is not normal. That is a police state of sorts trying to make people frighten people into silence or compliance. And that's worth knowing and that's worth saying out loud.
Yeah. People are just talking about, we have several people who are naturalized citizens here in the chat, and they are concerned, and they're giving each other really good advice about what to do, like what documentation to have at least a lawyer's number memorized. Scary to think, but good advice. Um,
Well,
so
I mean, so here's an example that's less scary, but that actually I did. That's an example of how the sorts of things we're talking about now are not just things to think about now. Minor example, but years ago, I don't know if you remember when there was an earthquake in Washington, D.C., good number of years ago, right?
it was actually in Charlottesville, but y'all felt it up in Washington, D.C.
I was in Washington,
9 miles
D.C.
from my house.
I was in Washington.
Yeah.
And what happened was I was researching at the Library of Congress. They took everyone out of the Library of Congress. My purse was locked in the Library of Congress, and no one was allowed to go back in until people checked the building to make sure it was safe. So I was like outside the Library of Congress with no ID, no money, no nothing, and I wasn't probably going to be able to get any that afternoon, and I didn't quite know what to do. And a perfectly kind stranger who had seen me in the manuscript division doing my research, when I said, "Wow, I have no money and no ID," he gave me $20
Hmm.
and said, you can go back to your hotel with the $20, which I did. Actually saw him and got to repay him. But regardless, got to the hotel and realized I had no ID. So I had no, I didn't have my key. I had nothing.
Mhm.
That I couldn't get back into my room, that I could, I was really like had nothing. And luckily, for reasons that I do not know, I had my credit card memorized. And so I know, don't ask me why. And I don't know why. I can't even tell you why. It was for no solid reason. But I said to them, look, if I can recite to you the card that paid for the room,
Will you let me in?
which they did, right?
Wow.
And not only that, but they like even advanced me a little bit of money because I said I have no idea, I have no money. So anyway, what that taught me was always have one of your credit cards
Mm.
memorized because you never know where you might be in a tough situation and that's going to save your butt, right? That's going to be an important thing. So I have always, after that point, it has nothing to do with the current day. It's like way before, but that became something that I don't ever want to be in that situation again. So some of what we're talking about now is primed to this moment, but is probably just good overall. That was an important lesson that unfortunately I learned the hard way, and it all ended up okay, but still, yes.
All right. If you're traveling this
Wait
summer,
a minute. Dave says,
download the chat.
can't, hang on. Dave says you can't remember the episode number, but you knew your credit card. Your brain is not normal. I know.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you why. I don't know what sticks in there and what doesn't, but yeah.
Get the laugh emoji.
I know. That's totally valid.
That's so funny. All right. Our good buddy Dave says, what is a normally functioning Congress? What is a normal member of Congress? When did Congress morph from legislating and compromise to performance? Ooh.
Okay, so that's a multiple answer, multiple choice question. So for one thing, it's not as though there was like normal, 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 not, right? So, and this is true. I talk about this a lot when I teach history because people have a sense like, women's rights just getting better and better, or, whatever, their sense of the trajectory of things is usually solid or stable or always getting better. And, all of history does this. So I can't say, wow, Congress was great until, fill in the blank. Congress has been active and reactive and better and worse throughout American history. So I can't say that some of what's happening now has never happened before. What is happening now is there is a president who is exerting executive power in ways that executive power is not intended to be exerted. And Congress, particularly the GOP in Congress, are not really responding. So they're not upholding the weight and duty of their branch, right? So that's in this moment, that's one of the more striking things is that there are members of Congress who are just sort of letting things go. And they don't, not only do they not have to, they shouldn't be. They should be speaking up. They should be, particularly the GOP can speak up and say, we don't like this. And they're not for a variety of reasons. And we can talk about fear and other things if we want to. But regardless, Congress is not doing fully what it's supposed to do. I mean, checks and balances is not just a phrase we learned in, eighth grade. They're supposed to be checking each other, the branches, and balancing each other out. And right now, there's a real imbalance and not a lot being done to fix that balance. So that's part of what we're experiencing right now. And it's partly Congress doing what it's doing, but it's that combined with a president who is like sucking all the air out of the room, who is just taking all power he can possibly grab and beyond, power that he doesn't have, power that he never had, power that he, whatever it is he wants to claim, he's claiming it. And we're not getting pushback from Congress to the degree that we should be getting pushback from Congress. And in some cases, even some Democrats are, I think, assuming that the system, if you abide by the system and work within the system, that you can do things within the system. And in some ways, we're just past that point of like, if we do politics as normal, we can fix things. I think we have to be, I think some members of Congress, and there are some doing this, need to be louder, need to be resistant, need to think outside of the box, right? Need to be operating in a different way because this is a different moment. This is not, this is talk about understatement. This is not a normal political moment in many ways. And so having a press conference or a behind closed doors meeting or let's reach across the aisle, we're not at that moment. We're not at that moment. And that gets to another part of this question actually was performance. Congress is always in some way about performance. Always. I mean, from the beginning, one of the first things that was being debated about Congress was do we let journalists in? Do we let the public in? Who gets to see? And there were people, again, way back, we're talking Thomas Jefferson. Well, if we don't let people see what's happening, it's just going to be corrupt. We have to let people see what's happening. So, in some way, Congress is the people's branch. Congress is supposed to be doing the people's business and is supposed to be, representing our wants and our needs. And we should know what Congress is doing. So, in that way, there is always a performative dimension to Congress. Now, obviously, that changes. It changed with the telegraph, it changed with radio, and changed with TV, and it changes depending on the technology and how many people can watch and how. But there's always been a performative element. So when people recently have been, like Cory Booker, like, oh, that was just performance, right? He had this long filibuster. He stood there for all of those hours. Who cares? It's just performance. Well, okay, number one, yeah, it's performance. And in Congress, that's the place to do that. If you're in government, that's the place to do that kind of performance. And that kind of performance matters. That kind of performance highlights an issue. That kind of performance potentially inspires people. I can say firsthand that when I saw signs that people had at the march that happened, I don't know, it was the week after the filibuster, people's signs said, Corey sent me. Okay, so performance isn't just performance sometimes. Sometimes it literally is a way to speak more loudly than words can, a way to motivate, a way to build momentum, a way to get a movement going. So I don't I don't think it makes sense, and I see a lot of people downplaying it's just performance. Performance is part of politics, and performance in the people's branch has always mattered. My last book talks about this in a lot of ways in a totally different time period, right? People doing things in part for the press, so the press will report. So at any rate, performance isn't necessarily meaningless and shallow. Performance can be politics. And sometimes right now it's an important kind of politics because it is getting beyond the sort of ongoing hum of like it's good, it's bad, it's legal, it's not legal. Sometimes a performance can just point fingers and say, look, this is what's happening now, and get people to listen in a different way. So I don't agree with the people who are like naysaying things like the filibuster as just performance. I think performance matters a lot.
All right. Karen has a very short, but it hit me when I read it. She said, "What are your students most worried about?"
Oh, wow. What are they most worried about? Well, I would say I think my graduate students are just worried, period, because it's some of their fellows, not necessarily at Yale, but I think a handful of people at Yale whose visas are being, taken away. I mean, I think they're just worried. My undergrads, I think I don't know. I can't speak for them. I don't know if there's like a thing that they're most worried about. I think they can totally sense that no one around them, their teachers, their elders, don't necessarily know the ins and outs of what's going on. And I think that's scary. Um, I think well, I think that's part of what they're worried about. I think they're worried, those who are seniors, I know some of them are worried about what they're going out into. I had one student drop a course, drop my seminar because she said all of her plans for what she was going to do after she graduated had blown up, and now she has to like figure something else out. And so she decided not to to stop taking the class. So, there's some immediate things I think, particularly undergrad seniors who are graduating and are trying to figure out what's going to be around for them to do. I think that's a valid thing for them to be worried about right now. But generally speaking, I think the instability of things and the fact that no one really knows sort of what's going to happen, that's what's scaring all of us. And I think that's what's scaring them as well. But if they're in school, students, they can look to us, they can look to teachers for some kind of guidance. Um, I actually had two students come up to me at the end of class on Wednesday and say, actually, I'll talk about this in the after party. But anyway, students are looking for advice of various sorts from people who they trust. And right now, I think particularly they're looking for some sorts of stability, and that makes sense. And it's just hyper extreme now versus in normal times.
Yeah. And Claire, Claire and I don't have the ability to add a question, but
Oh,
but I got you, Claire. I've always got your back. Claire asked, "How will the attacks on education affect the students of today once they are the adult members of our citizenry?"
it's a good question. I don't know. Again, I don't, I will not pronounce, well, I can tell you exactly how.
No
No,
crystal ball here.
that's right. No one can. But one would think that if you went through this moment, and you certainly, again, can't speak for all students everywhere, but certainly it appears to me that, my students, generally speaking, at Yale are pretty aware of what's going on. They might be more sensitive to people trying to control what they can or can't say, right? They might be primed for things that maybe some people were not necessarily primed for because they didn't think it would get this far this fast or something like you're not allowed to teach X or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. I know that it's a really good question because certainly these students are going to be sensitized to a lot of things that certainly I didn't have to be sensitized to when I was in college. I mean, I did kind of have my political awakening in college because it was 1980. It was Reagan running, and it was the first time he came to campus, and it was the first time I talked about this on the first podcast I did, the backstory podcast about that was my political awakening because Reagan came to campus, and then all of a sudden I saw all these things happening around me, and I had to start thinking about things, and then suddenly I was like, I actually have really strong feelings about it. Who knew? Um, so we all are sensitized, particularly when we're in college, to things. But right now, uh, that's actually a really good question that almost would be it would be interesting to get students to respond to that. Like think 20 years from now, what do you think you're going to remember about this moment? Would be an interesting question to ask people.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
oh, Claire says 2020 was her freshman year.
wow.
Oh,
Wow.
okay. First of all, that means you're 2 years old, Claire. But still, so also, yeah, right? I mean, yeah, we're all of us, not just students, are being sensitized in all kinds of weird ways now that we can't predict. Like the pandemic had me suddenly like buying a lot more food than I needed. And then as soon as we got into this moment, I'm like, well, I think I'm just going to buy more food than I need because I've now been primed to do that. I sort of feel like what people would say about 2.5 years old. Okay. Says Claire, I'm 2.5 years old. That, you think about people during the who survived the depression and then always were people who saved and hoarded and kept and because of course it has an impact on you. So the fact of the matter is we all are being shaped by this in various ways, some of which we probably can recognize now and some that we won't recognize till later. Oh, look at that. Tim, of course, found Reagan. Oh no, Reagan at Yale. I was talking about good old Pomona College, not Yale, but yeah. I went to Pomona College for undergrad. Um,
He
so
came to Pomona?
pardon?
He came to Pomona.
He came to the Claremont colleges. So there's five of them there. He came and gave a talk. And actually it really did he so it was he had made a comment about um trees being dangerous, I can't remember what the dumb comment was, but it was a dumb comment about, trees themselves being dangerous in some ways for emitting some kind of something. And people had decorated the area where Reagan was speaking. The trees had signs that said, kill me before I kill again. And a bunch of people showed up with coat hangers because, of course, there was a lot of anti-abortion talk going on, and he lost his temper and yelled at us. But the part that shocked me was before he started speaking, there were singers on stage singing, and they were singing Christian songs. They were singing Jesus songs, and I just hadn't thought about politics a lot before that moment. And I walked over, and they were singing Jesus songs, and I thought, I am explicitly being told I'm not wanted here. Like,
Wow. Wow.
wow. I don't know why they're thinking that now is the moment to talk about Jesus, but guess what? Uh, I took it for what it was meant as. We're talking about Christianity here. It was like, yeah, I guess you are. And that doesn't belong here. And I know about separation of church and state. And I kind of went, I think my head probably went like in circles a few times. It was just like, what? What? Like what? And that really, really affected me. I was a freshman in college and I just hadn't thought that way before. So college, we are all being changed and imprinted and affected by different things, but particularly I think in college. So it's a long answer to a good question.
Yeah. All right, we've still got tons of questions, but thank you, Karen, for that last one about.
Oh, I do want, even though it's not in the Q&A, I do want to address this. Kathy Porter says, are the anti-Semitic charges being overblown to push an agenda? Yes. Yes. I think in the same way that DEI now stands for anything that a certain group of people don't like. I think, protecting Jews against anti-Semitism, it's just that's the same cover. It's a mask. Oh, it's anti-Semitic. We're going to go come after you. And that seems like a great mask because no one likes anti-Semitism. But a lot of like Jews aren't pointing to all of these things saying, wow, that's anti-Semitic. This is coming from people who want to shut people up. So yes, I do think a lot of what's going on right now, claiming that something is anti-Semitic, it's just a mask. It's just a ploy. And it's a effective one because no one wants to be seen as anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is bad. Ironically, if you're using Jews as a way to mask your hate behavior, that's anti-Semitic.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Um, okay, Deb and Paul said, given our times are not normal, having political leaders who are used to normal times can be a liability rather than asset. What characteristics of political leaders would be more appropriate during these not so normal times?
Repeat the question for me.
So, given that we are not living in normal times, she's asking if having political leaders that are used to normal times, is that a liability? What
Oh,
characteristics do we need now in this moment that would be more appropriate?
well, I think it's understandable that political folk who have lived their adult lives and their careers within the political world, and if throughout most of that time it has been functioning semi-normally, it makes perfect sense that those are people who would continue to turn to the system and turn to the way things normally operate as a way to get things done. I understand the logic of that, but I don't think right now that's an entirely useful logic. I think more than anything else, we need people who are willing to step outside of the box. And I don't mean something necessarily radical. I just mean think of new ways to talk to people, to get people's attention, to get people to think about issues. Um, think outside of the box, meaning don't continue operating as normal all along. And we've seen that. We're seeing more and more of that. So, I don't know necessarily deliberately, but actually, I almost was going to talk about this today and decided not to. But we're seeing a lot of people. Tim Walz, um, Al Gore, like just angry people, right? Like really angry men. Actually, I was like, men. I was like, well, Jasmine Crockett's been pretty mad too, but and AOC too. But at any rate, we're seeing people who are just, particularly, I saw a video of Al Gore, like almost red-faced with outrage. Um, that's not what we normally see. I'm not saying we all need to see outraged, red-faced politicians, but that is not what we're used to seeing, right? And I had that response, was like, wow, that's so people who are willing to do things that do not appear to be just the normal hum, but to think innovatively, to think creatively about the ways in which they are talking to the public, particularly, this gets back to it's not just performance. That's one thing we need is people who can think in an innovative political way in this particular moment.
Okay, scrolling down, still tons of questions.
I want
Gloria,
to, I know it got in the Q&A. I'm going to address this because Gloria says she's shocked to hear someone saying anti-Semitism is a mask to cover something else. I'm not saying anti-Semitism doesn't exist. I do think that people who are saying we need to find out, for example, Barnard, right? Check off on this form if you're Jewish. No, sorry, but no. I think that right now, I'm not saying anti-Semitism doesn't exist. I've experienced it my whole life, so I'm definitely not saying that. But what I am saying is right now, this administration is pretending that anything that they're doing is because of anti-Semitism, and it isn't. Some of it may be. but not all of it is. And some of it is just the same way they use DEI, the same way that they use critical race theory. It becomes a mask for them to do what they want to do. It's not saying there's no anti-Semitism, believe me, but everything that they're pointing to and saying is anti-Semitism isn't. They're using that because it's effective, because people, you know, who's going to say they like anti-Semitism? Nobody. And it's effective. So yeah, and I think if you're deploying charges of anti-Semitism as a way to shut people up, which in some cases this administration is, that is anti-Semitism.
So Gloria had actually put a question that people were reminding her, like, don't put that in the chat. It goes in Q&A. So to kind of
Did I just address it? I'm sorry.
part of it, but she says that she's scared too, that the Democrats take junkets at my expense, her expense, to defend an illegal guy who had MS-13 on his fingers. What is alarming is the constant use of the law to gain power for a political group. Are you alarmed by that?
I'm not quite sure what is that referring to?
I think she's talking about the man that's being detained. She's saying that he had MS-13 on his fingers.
Oh, that was falsified.
Yeah. That's
So yeah, I
been.
am alarmed. I am alarmed that the President of the United States held up a fake piece of evidence to justify keeping someone imprisoned, and paying for him to be imprisoned. That alarms me. Yes, that's shocking. So yeah, uh, Photoshop. Yeah, that was fake evidence. And the fact that that happened, the fact that that got relatively little play, the fact that, that's a whole different matter. But the president is paying El Salvador to keep this man imprisoned, and to justify it, they've been lying, and now they presented a Photoshop piece of evidence. That's just beyond. That's shocking. Yeah.
Okay, our good friend Sydney is with us this week. Sydney asks, how can we take that fear we're all feeling and turn it into action? Can we not let them crush us and cripple us with fear and intimidation?
Well, right. It's tempting. I understand feeling paralyzed. I understand feeling intimidated. I understand all of these things. I write about this. I write about a whole population of people feeling paralyzed and scared in the 19th century. So it's totally understandable. And it's okay, to feel scared and to feel like you just need to hunker down and watch bad TV or drink a martini, right? I can say firsthand, sometimes you totally need to tune out. And that's understandable, and there should be no guilt involved in that. But another way to respond to that is to turn to others, is to join with others, to find friends who you can talk to about this stuff, to find a community of people who will be with you in that moment. And sometimes, honestly, some of the marching that's happening, some of the power and importance of the marching is just that it gets a lot of people together and they realize that they share similar feelings, and that can be important. That can have a real power to it on a personal level. So, part of the answer is, what do we do with our feelings in this moment? Again, I never claim to have all the answers, and I sometimes am scared, and I am sometimes watching bad TV and either drinking a martini or taking a nap or playing with Rosie or something that is very explicitly escape behavior, and that's okay. But then there are other times where I'm going to talk with people about it or act with people about it or write about it or something about it. So give yourself a break and don't feel guilty if you don't feel that every minute you're doing something. And I should be pointing at myself because this is what I do. Like Freeman. Whenever I'm mad at myself, I always use my last name. Freeman. Freeman. You should be doing something now. You should be writing something now. Why aren't you acting? I do that all the time, constantly. But I will say as you should do and not as I do. Be kind to yourself and give yourself permission to tune out, but then also give yourself permission to connect with others and just talk about this stuff. I honestly just think that this colleague saying I'm scared was such a weird relief for me in the last week or two. It was just like, oh, of course she is. And I am too. And I'm not like this weird, scared, weak person off on the side being scared, right? It's like everyone's scared. Oh, yeah. Okay, and we should be at this moment. We have a reason to be scared. So, okay, that's actually also infuriating. That's actually also anger inducing. That also can be a motivator. None of this should be happening. We don't deserve this. This is not what our nation is, or what it should be, put it that way. It's not what it should be. Um, so, be scared and then stand up once you've taken a couple of breaths. Join with others. Don't sit it out alone, but join with others.
So Dave just put a bad pun in the chat.
Uh-oh.
He asked if you call your desk the Freeman Bureau. That sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit, like
That
an
does sound like a
drama.
Saturday Night Live. I never thought of it before, and now I'm going to have to think
Now
about
it's all you'll think about the rest of the day. Thanks a lot, Dave.
it. I know.
Or
Thanks,
was it
Becky.
Dave or Daniel? Now I can't remember. It was either Dave or Daniel. Oh,
Oh.
it was Daniel. It was Daniel. Okay, I want to make sure I give credit to the right joke. Okay, so Barbara asked, is SCOTUS's ruling on POTUS immunity, that is letting 47 speak and do illegal things, if it had been Biden or Obama saying and doing these illegal things, they would have been out of office already.
Well, yeah. So, certain, I can't, again, I can't, I would assume yes, but I don't know that. What I can say is, and if those of you who didn't see it, Heather and I did a conversation, which is on our YouTube pages, I think, about due process. And one of the things that we were talking about was, now I totally forgot where I was just going. Um, Immunity. She said she was talking about how was what's going on now in El Salvador and people being sent there and being paid to be kept there and no due process allowed to this person at all. Is that the moment that changed things for you? And in the end, we both said, no, actually, it was immunity. It was presidential immunity that was like the moment that I thought our government has just been fundamentally reshaped in a way that we don't even understand what that means. She and I actually had that conversation at the time. Like, I'm sure I have it somewhere, and I don't know where, but I'm sure I saved it because I saved too many things. But somewhere she and I had a conversation that was like, people do not realize what just happened fundamentally to the structure and nature of our government with that decision. I thought that then, I continue to think that. But I do think that what we're seeing now with people being disappeared illegally without due process and sent to a foreign, prison of sorts. Yeah, that's another one. That's another one. People are being disappeared. People are being disappeared. And the government is paying for them to remain disappeared. And the fact that we need to think about that, the fact that earlier on in this conversation, I said, hey, keep some phone numbers in writing because you never know. That's not normal. That's not normal. None of this is normal. We shouldn't have to worry when we step outside the house about what's going to happen, about someone might with no uniform might come for us and do something and we don't know. That's not normal. That's not how we normally operate in a functioning democracy. That's not normal. And yet, in some way, all of us have different fears, but little things sort of in the back of our mind about things we have to worry about that we didn't worry about before. And you put yourself in that zone for very logical reasons, and you sort of forget the degree to which you didn't always have to be living with those hums of anxiety in your head at all time. So much of what we're going through now is profoundly abnormal in a functioning democracy with democratic governance. And, this last week, there were a number of people who came out and said, we are not at this moment a functioning democratic country. That is not what we have at this particular moment. Um, I would say go read what some people have been saying this last week about where we are. And I don't say that to alarm people. I say that because, again, we need to see precisely where we are. We need to know where we are, and we need to join with others in pointing that out and deciding what to do together about it. Oh, I see. Mug, mug, mug.
Mug, mug,
Yeah,
mug. We're a
mug, mug,
little
mug.
after 11. There's still 16 questions, so
Wow.
we're going to get through all of them. Claire can maybe email them.
Yeah, it might be that we need another anything goes next week, or that we can combine a little anything goes every week. Maybe actually that would be a way to do this, would be to have a topic and then I talk for a shorter amount of time, and I don't know, we'll have to see, but we're not going to get through 16 questions.
No, we're not. So
Uh,
mug reveal. If you're new,
okay.
this is exciting.
Yeah, so let me explain what's going on. If you are new, so for all of the bazillion episodes, I've already forgotten the number.
265.
Thank you. For 264 previous episodes, I have a mug that relates to what we're talking about. I'm going to have an embarrassing admission with this mug in a moment, but I have not used this one before. That I can tell you. But the mug relates thematically to what we're talking about, and I don't have 265 mugs, so there's been repetition, but not this one. My embarrassing thing about this is that the person who gave it to me, it's a History Matters person who gave it to me. I told her that I would not use the mug when she wasn't here to see me use it for the first time. I think it's Ellen. This is the embarrassing part.
Ellen's here. Ellen's
Ellen,
definitely here.
Ellen, did you give me a mug and say that you laughed when you saw it and tell me to not use it when you weren't here?
She says no chirp. Oh, that's so cute.
So
Adorable.
yes, I thought that was you. Because it's anything goes, I was free to use any mug I wanted, and I've been waiting to be able to use this mug because it made me laugh when I took it out of the box, Ellen. Thank you very much. Yes. I would never ask for mugs. If you want to send a mug, I don't know, send it to NCHE.
Yeah.
I think that's mostly what people have
And
been.
Joanne, I did finally get that package in the mail to you. Then I realized I didn't put a note in it. So hopefully you know it's from me.
Okay.
My name is on the then I was like, you dummy, you should have put a note in there.
Okay.
But
Oh,
it
I
is
did use it. I
away.
did use it once before when I got the bird. Is that true?
Oh, maybe. I don't remember it though, but you
I
made
don't
it.
remember, but it's possible. At any rate, I love the mug, and I
Beautiful.
just also love the bird.
And it's big. It's a nice heavy. I like
It's
a nice heavy
This is
mug.
like as big as
That's
my
why I
head.
like these old NCHE ones because
Yeah,
they're
yeah, it's
heavy.
huge. Anyway,
And they have
so
your quote on the back. Thank you for engaging in
yes,
democracy.
lots of coffee.
Yeah,
Okay,
lots
so
of
now
coffee.
let me explain what's going to happen now. Okay, so Tim's never seen the mug. I don't
I
think
don't
I've
remember it. I don't think you've used it. I don't remember it.
Yeah, I don't think so. At any rate, regardless, here's what's going to happen now. We are going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording, so that we can be even freer and easier in whatever the heck it is we want to talk about. If you beamed in through NCHE, just stay right where you are and give it to me in the chat, folks.
Everybody on count of three. One, two, three. Woof.
Poof. Okay, stay right where you are and poof. Thank you. You will be in the after party. If you are beaming in through Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. I want to, as ever, thank all of you for being here, uh, engaging in the conversation of democracy on a Friday morning, for being here just generally, and for making this the community that it is, and for being a prime example of how important and wonderful community can be, particularly in moments like this. I'm so grateful that you guys are here and that we are here, and to NCHE and my partner in crime, Annie, and Claire, and Jessica, and John, for making this possible. And I will see you all next week. Uh, so those of you who need to leave, of course, you are free to leave. And those of you who want to stick around for the after party, and I want to show you something that a student gave me, and I didn't know she'd want it on tape, so I
Right.
decided I would wait for it until the after party. But
Great
anyway, for those
choice.
who are not sticking around, have a wonderful week, and who the heck knows what we'll be talking about next Friday. Okay.